Hey, everybody, welcome to The Past Less Traveled, where we do history differently. This week, I have Leif Halvorson. Leif was on here early on back in 2021. For those of you that have maybe gone back and listened to some of those old episodes, or if this is a first time, feel free to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and go back and hear that first interview that we did with Leif. So with that, Leif, thanks for being on The Past Less Traveled. How you doing?
Hey, Brandon, doing pretty well. Thanks for having me on here tonight.
Yeah, anytime. So those of us that are, kind of up here in Northwest North Dakota, or I guess I should just say the upper Midwest and do living history, we're pretty familiar with an annual event that I know you enjoy. I definitely have enjoyed for well over a decade, and that is Fort Union Rendezvous.
Yeah, next week is going to be our 41st annual one that's going to be taking place at the site. Lots of folks come on in, lots of living historians. We've got different guest presenters and everything where we, as best as we can, help make the place come alive so that when families come in and we've got kids groups that'll be coming in on Thursday, kind of get an opportunity to step back in time and learn about the rich history that we've got in the Confluence area.
Yeah, so really just for folks that maybe aren't familiar with the area. I know Williston gets, a lot of there's a lot of diversity in town. There's a lot of new people in town. There's a lot of new people over in Sydney, where you're from. Tell people just kind of a brief overview of Fort Union and why Fort Union Trading Post is so important to the American historical experience.
Well, for one things, in kind of a way, it was a bit of a ahead of its time. A lot of people don't understand that you've got, nine or so different area tribes that are trading at this place, not too far from the confluence of the Yellowstone and Missouri rivers, a place where, for the most part, it was a pretty peaceable place. When I talk to visitors, I say it would be a fallacy to say that everyone was holding hands singing Kumbaya, but it was during a time frame where, for the most part, they figured out a methodology of being able to work with each other. It's a place of international trade that's going on. You've got 200 some odd trade items from close to a dozen different countries across the not the United States, but across the world, actually, some of which are taking 2 years to eventually make their way to Fort Union. And these are items that, it's just not on the whim of the American Fur Company. They're stocking these, hoping that they're going to sell like hotcakes. By the time you get to 1851, which is the middle of the fort's operating time frame, um, the reason why all those items are there is because these are what the tribes are expecting to see. It's essentially tribal driven inventory. If you don't have what they want, you got to update your inventory. Otherwise, they're gonna go someplace else. And they did a good job of figuring that out.
Yeah, you're talking about the trade a little bit. Maybe explain for people just the importance of the fur trade, its economics. I mean, because at the end of the day, that's what makes Fort Union essentially tick as a business for its time, right?
Yeah, so I'll back up even before it starts. Lots of folks have heard about Lewis and Clark, and they go right through this area of the confluence. In 1806, they're coming back. Lewis is on the Missouri, Clark's on the Yellowstone. They're going to meet up at the confluence. They end up meeting a couple miles further east of the confluence because the mosquitoes are just that bad. Once they make it back home, and they're essentially doing a debrief with President Jefferson. One of the things that they say is this confluence area of the Yellowstone and the Missouri River would be an ideal location for the U.S. to have a trading post. Now, they're probably thinking more of similar lines to what some of the trading posts in Canada were like, where there might be a garrison of troops there along with trading. And this kind of tied in with President Jefferson's thoughts during that time frame of while you are out there, while you are exploring this area, you let the different tribes know about us because we're all part of the same country now. And Jefferson really wanted to try to make possible the um, kind of bringing the different tribal groups into the fold of, hey, we're all part of the same thing. And one of the things that neighbors do is we trade with each other, we converse with each other. And so this idea of having a trading post established out there is an opportunity to foster that type of a thing. Being neighborly, interacting with your neighbors, developing those friendships and everything. A little while later, a little thing called the War of 1812 happens, and obviously they end up not doing that. It would have been the furthest west trading post at that time frame. They just wasn't from the vantage point during that, this wasn't a good use of resources. So that didn't come to fruition. However, a short while after that, what Lewis and Clark said about that being a good location, half a dozen or so different trading posts end up propping up in that area over time. So while Lewis and Clark go through, they actually bump into a smaller band of the Assiniboine, the Stony Band of the Assiniboine, and the chief's name was Chief Iron Arrow Point, and he's there while Lewis and Clark go through. Um, you fast forward a little bit, we get on into the 1820s, and members of the AFC, the American Fur Company, which was started by John Jacob Astor, a German American. They essentially say, now look, you guys build trading posts. The Mandan and the Hidatsa have Fort Clark. How about you come and build us one? And the AFC goes, I guess we're just going to have to do that. And he goes, great, build it here. This is where we want you to build our trading post. This is the stable side of the river. This is a good location. This is where our people want our trading post to be. And they listen to that. And so the AFC, and James Kipp is one of these guys that's been working with the AFC. He's part of the building and everything. And they get Fort Union built, opens kind of sort of for business in December of 1828. And then it runs all the way for 39 years, a couple years past the end of our American Civil War, 1867, when it closes down, type of a thing. So it being there, it starts out as this Assiniboine trading post, but as time goes on, a number of other tribes end up trading there as well too. We mentioned the Mandan and the Dots, and we're going to throw the Arikara in there as well too, today known as the three affiliated tribes. They will end up trading at Fort Union. The Plains Cree, the Northern Cheyenne, parts of the Gros Ventre, the Blackfoot Confederacy, which was comprised of the Piegans, the Bloods, and the Siksika. They eventually, because of coming to Fort Union, end up getting their own series of trading posts farther into what becomes Western Montana. And towards the latter part of the fort's time frame, the Sioux have been working their way through and are in kind of the neck of the woods there. And three different bands of the Sioux begin trading there too: the Dakota, the Lakota, and the Nakota. So you've got a pretty diverse grouping of people that are all working there. Um, a dozen or so different European countries represented by the employees that are staffed there. You've got 9, 10 or so different tribal groups that are coming and trading there. They don't always get along. The Arikara and the Assiniboine didn't always, and the Blackfoot and the Cree didn't always, and that created some tensions, unfortunately. But as time goes on, they kind of came up with this methodology of a time for trade's a time for truce. Your people benefit from this. Our people benefit from this. And when we fight each other outside, they close the doors and no one can do anything. So let's just kind of make this work. And it comes to the point where during trade season anyway, in the encampment of the different tribes that are outside, if tribes are not getting along well right now, let's say that the Cree are in trading. Well, the Blackfeet might stay in camp several miles away. They're just going to wait until the Cree are all cleared out before they come on in. So there's kind of some self-policing going on like that, as well as time goes on, these tribes that are otherwise not getting along well are actually engaged in trade in the tribal encampment outside the post, which you don't always see. That's a pretty incredible thing. These things are all these trade goods that are coming up. You've got your kind of your standard stuff like your blankets and your textiles. You've got different things like hawk bells and whatnot for ornamentation. You've got glass Venetian beads that are coming in. You do have firearms, the Northwest Trade Gun. That's the most highly common black powder firearm that was being traded for. A lot of people go, that must have been one of the top ticket items, and it's not actually. A lot of At best, most of the time, the company was breaking even on those, and a lot of the times they were losing money on it. But they kind of saw that as an investment in the continuation of the trade while things were going on. Foodstuffs are being imported as well. The top ticket items that is really important that they have ironed out, and they've got the right stuff, the right color, the right quality. That's the textiles. That accounts for so much of the trade that's taking place. Um, as time goes on and you continue these trade relations um, with the tribes in the area, it's not uncommon that the inventory is going to change because of how particular customers they were. The women in particular were very shrewd business people, and they held a lot of sway at what was going to happen at Fort Union as far as trade goes. For example, if they're looking for a bolt of fabric, because remember, this is the kind of the spring and summer months where it gets doggone hot on the Dakota and Montana plains. So having a cloth-based clothing makes life a lot more comfortable. It was not uncommon for her to pull out her own sewing needle and begin to count the number of threads over a given distance on a bolt of fabric. The trader has no idea what that magic number is or how far she's going to count. He's just hoping that she's going to be satisfied with it. And if not, she's going to toss it back and say, no, no, this isn't quality. You give me something else. So he'll pull down the next bolt of fabric and hopefully to where she's going to be satisfied. There are accounts as well too of with the trade blankets. There were issues with the trade blankets to begin with. The American Fur Company was stocking American-made wool blankets. Nothing wrong with them. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry back home had one of these. But they just didn't like them. The women would be allowed to examine them, go to the fire, toss the edge in, and singe down the nap on the outside of the edge of the blanket to see the tightness of the weave. And if she wasn't happy, she's tossing this singed blanket back at the trader saying, no, you give me something better. So as these interactions are taking place, especially early on, they've got this running inventory in the trade house where they're keeping track not just of the inventory of what all is selling, but what other things there's issues with. Because especially on that textile side of things, the AFC, while they are essentially buying, today we think of buying fabric by the yard. They're kind of almost buying it by the mile. They're going through that much fabric between all of their trading posts. So if you've got stuff that your customers, your trade partners aren't interested in, that's not a good investment of company funds, essentially, for the continuation of business. So they're constantly writing notes in there like we need, this particular tribal group wants more like of the navy blue Stroud cloth, but this one wants green, but this one wants red. So you got to make sure you don't get rid of all of those. Sometimes that happened. You'd have to backtrack, and they're updating this inventory. The blankets, they start with English or the American-made wool blankets. Those don't go over well. They switch it to French wool blankets, which don't go over well, and then they settle on English wool blankets. And for the most part, everyone's pretty satisfied from that point forward. So while she runs from 1828 to 1867, Fort Union, it's reconstructed to the year 1851. That's what you're kind of getting a snapshot in time of when trade was taking place. So when you go in there and you get to go inside that trade room into the store area and you look at those items that are on display, this is after a lot of that hard work has been done of interaction between the post employees and the tribes that are trading. That inventory that's there at that point is essentially there because that's what the tribes are expecting to see. Now, if they're not dissatisfied, and this just goes to show the importance of customer relations and good trade relations, and what I was saying, how the women had a lot of sway at what was going on. If in her frustrations of trying to have items that she's satisfied with, if she just gets tired and wore out of trying to get this trader to give her the types of things that she wants, she'll just be done. And it doesn't matter if they've finished their interaction or not. She's just done and she'll walk away. But it's not just one person who's gone now. She's going to grab her husband. She's going to grab her kids. She's going to grab her aunt. She's going to grab her grandparents. Next minute, 20 some odd people are no longer trading because you didn't satisfy the requirements that she had for the type of items that she wanted to get. We're leaving. We're going to go someplace else. You can go trade with the Hudson Bay Company if you want. We'd rather you not. We'd rather you trade at Fort Union type of a thing. So it was really important that they figure that out, and they did pretty much early on. The tribes are the one that's driving that inventory. And the AFC at Fort Union, anyway, did a really good job of updating those things. So you could go all the way to the end of the line. The steamboat first arrives in 1832, becomes the mainstay of transporting goods. Eventually, it's not to the year 1860, it's able to push all the way into present Fort Benton, Montana. That was an American Fur Company post as well. Now they're both being outfitted by the same company who's ordering all of those goods. Their inventory is going to look different than the inventory that you see at Fort Union because they're more marketing towards the Blackfoot trade there compared to everything else that was taking place at Fort Union. So while it's owned by the same company and you're importing the same trade goods, you're going to see a variety and a difference between the two posts because you want to have in stock what the tribes that you're marketing to want you to have on hand.
Yep. I mean, I just, we talk about the, I've heard your talk before with the public, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody
Ain't
happy.
nobody, and that transcends time and culture. It really does, um, to different degrees. But I mean, that's just yet one more kind of common ground thing that you can see taking place there, which is kind of cool, because to an extent, regardless of what your background is, everyone can kind of relate to that concept, which is neat. You don't see that every place.
That and just these, like, I just have an image somewhere, and I mean it's probably totally just made up in my head, but of just where a warehouse or a room just plumb full of singed blankets.
Yeah, like
I
yeah,
mean, you had to know that they were probably noting that as a loss at some point. I mean,
yeah,
somewhere of just now, what do I do with these singed blankets? I mean, it's not like you can just flip them over and put them on a showroom floor kind of thing.
yeah. We're gonna cut the bottom 6 inches off. Hope nobody notices, type of a thing.
And I bet you they tried it. I mean, and not to say they were trying to do anything
Yeah,
nefarious, but um, we talked about kind of how that fur trade works, the importance of Fort Union and the tribes. Let's go a little deeper into, um, the public, or when you engage with the public, maybe it's their first time out at the fort, they walk into that trade room, which we really, for all of us as living historians, for you working on the NPS side seasonally, we really hope the public comes in that way first and just explain the process. This wasn't just somebody coming up to the drive-through window at Wendy's. I mean, this was very much a business negotiation. It was also personal on a lot of levels because you have engagés and clerks intermarrying in with tribes. So I mean, it's
yeah.
it's it's a family affair. It's a business transaction. I mean, go into a little bit of how that actual negotiation takes place to finally get it to where mama's over there purchasing those or trading those goods.
Yeah, so like it's kind of like Shrek says, ogres are like onions, they've got layers. And the donkey says, "How about cake? Everybody likes cake." Well, there's whether you prefer onions or cake, that there's a lot of layers going on in that. So, like, let's say that a new group shows up that has never traded at Fort Union before. You're gonna kind of have a sit down first. Your kind of your main leaders of the band or clan that you're a part of, and oftentimes that's taking place in the clerk's office. And Rudolph Kurz, who was an artist, he's one of the big reasons why we're reconstructed to the year 1851. He leaves a sketch of kind of one of those conversations taking place with a group of the Plains Cree, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, and in those discussions, it's kind of like you're setting the ground rules of, all right, so this is what you can expect from the post, but this is also what the post expects from you. This is the way that we plan on doing things, and as long as we all do these things, Louis, this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship type of a thing. Once you get done with that, then you've got the delegations that get to come on in, end up in that reception room. That's that first big room that's got the great big hearth that you walk into, of the trade room section. And these guys have got a lot of weight on their shoulders because they're bringing with them a sampling of the different furs and skins that their people have brought. The post is taking 20 some odd different species of fur bears, from as small as mice skins, yes, mice skins, to as large as things like buffalo, or you know, um, prairie grizzly, which unfortunately is extinct now. And they've got to they've got to do right by their people that they represent and try to get a good value, good trade value for it. There's just so many people. It's not every man, woman, and child for themselves going to the window, shoving in a stack full of furs and saying, "Hey, Mr. Trader guy, what's this worth so that I can trade?" This delegation's doing that for them. So they'll come on in with those, and there's a pomp and circumstance and a ceremony of what's going on. There would be buffalo robes spread out all over the floor. The trader that day who's working with this particular delegation, he's got coffee going on. He's also prepared a meal for him. A cornmeal mush or a buffalo stew would have been two common things. The headsmen that are kind of leading this delegation will end up kind of coming forward. They'll exchange some words. They're going to sit down. They will pass a pipe around in peace to set the stage of we're going to be honest with each other. And for a number of these folks, it's like just a reminding each other of we've been working with each other for a while now. Let's continue to do that. Let's continue to make things happen. And after they do that, they'll drink coffee. They'll have their meals. If the Assiniboines in, you got to make sure you've got the turbinado sugar for their coffee because they like the sugar in their coffee. They'll exchange some very long-winded speeches from both sides, and there'll be an exchange of gifts. And if this is a group that this trader's worked with before, items that he's received as gifts from them in the past, he'll usually have on display on the wall as kind of like a visual thank you. And a lot of times, this group will want to work with this particular trader because he's the son-in-law of one of the members of the delegation. So there's this concept of working with family, which sometimes adds to the longevity of the conversations that are taking place. So there's kind of this homecoming aspect as well too. Like it was a rough winter for us. How was it for our family? We haven't noticed the buffalo as close to the fort as they've been. How has hunting been for you? My sister-in-law, she married anybody yet in the tribe? My brother-in-law, is he still creating chaos for everybody, or has he decided it's time to settle down? These types of conversations are taking place. And after you get through all of that, they get down to in this case, the literal brass tacks um, of, all right, here's this sampling of all the furs that we brought. And, this isn't probably going to be the best of what they got or the worst of what they got. Think of it as kind of your average, and he'll assess it for a value. And just like today's modern fur buyers, he's going to lowball them. But this is no surprise. In fact, a lot of times this delegation has probably walked in with a variety of reasons why it's going to be worth more than what he says, but it's all part of the song and dance. It's not a surprise. Um, if it's taken a while, an additional exchange of gifts will take place just to kind of keep everybody in the rhythm of what's going on. And after that's all said and done, we're talking like 5 to 8 hours on average, just this aspect of what's happening. So kind of like the length of your average school day in a way. Um, Eventually they'll come to a decision that for the most part everybody's pretty happy with. And they're not assigning a cash value for these. This is more of like a trade or barter value. So for like the year 1851, a decent quality buffalo robe would be an equivalent exchange for a brand new English wool blanket. Not that everybody wants or needs one of those, but now we've got that exchange figured out. We can spend basically this buffalo robe on any number of trade items up to the value of an English wool blanket. So once they've got um, that decided upon, that deal is going to apply to just their people. So that delegation that's in there will get to leave. They'll get to go out, talk to the people they represent, and say, "All right, we did the job that you asked us to do." Because remember, they got a lot of weight on their shoulders, because they're intervening on behalf of their people. Because it's going to apply to all of them. If you're from a different band or different clan, you don't get to trade now. You got to wait till your delegation does this too, and you might not get the same deal. So they got a lot of weight on their shoulders, these guys. Number one, they don't want to let their people down. Number two, we talked already about the significance and the impact that women had within the trade of this. The women were the ones who had the majority of the hides to use for trading for items because they're the ones that are doing all this skinning, this fleshing, this brain tanning. In fact, girls as young as the age of 6 are being taught by their moms, by their sisters, by their aunts, by their grandmas how to skin, how to flesh. We talked about from as small as mice skins to as large as buffalo and prairie grizzly. These young girls are learning on things like mice skins, like gopher skins, because if you mess one up, it's not the end of the world. You know, you can just always go and get another mouse. From a teacher's standpoint, which I am, it's a bad methodology to, bring a green buffalo hide fresh from the kill, drop it in front of your 6-year-old and say, all right, sweetie, we'll see what you've accomplished by the end of the day. That's not the way to go about doing that. So within that family atmosphere, the women were working really well together, training the younger girls this aspect of their particular tribe's methodology of living for just the continuation and the furthering for the benefit of the band and clan that they were a part of through all of this fur handling. So if the guys in the delegation don't do a good job of arguing for a good value, number one, they've let their people down. But number two, they've let the women in their life down. You'll If you're one of the guys on there and you didn't do a good job, you'll hear it from your mom, you'll hear it from your grandma, all of the women in your life. So they had a lot of there are familial reasons why it's important for them to bring their A game to that moment type of a thing. Because that affects the entire group there type of a thing. So the women will come first because they've got the largest majority of the hides, and then afterwards the guys will come and spend their portion of the hides that they had from doing the hunting and all of that kind of stuff as well too. So those 6-year-old girls that we talked about learning to brain tan on mice skins and stuff, they get to come spend their mice skins. They do, and that's happening. A lot of people will, thanks to the terrible job that Hollywood has done for decades, um, there's this hang up in fascination with trade beads. They actually, while they were a trade item, they were not one of the prominent things that are being traded for. They're usually being given away as gifts. And we talked about how the tribes are the ones that are driving the inventory and they're keeping these good relations. They're being used as kind of you'll go into different stores sometimes and it's customer appreciation week. Come on in and see us and you'll get a free bag of popcorn and a coffee or whatever, and we'll give you a discount on stuff. So they were kind of using them for that as well too. So that sampling of furs that the delegation brought in, remember, they're kind of banking on the average, knowing that this value is going to be applied to pretty much whatever comes through those windows, knowing that there's a lot that are going to be average, some are going to be worse, but some are going to be better. So if you've got folks that are coming to the window that are passing in prime hides, like getting these back to St. Louis, these are going to be worth a lot of money. You want those people to keep on coming back. So at the end of that transaction, it would not be uncommon for the trader to go, okay, just a second. I know you've got all your stuff, but just a second, reach above the window, grab some hanks of beads and go, here, these are for you as well. Thank you. It was a customer service thing. Um, I think it was 1846 or thereabouts, one year, um, 200, 300 some odd pounds of beads were imported, and only 3 pounds were actually uh, traded out as trade items. The remaining balance of that were all given away as gifts. So that kind of 200 pounds of beads is a lot of beads. And so the vast majority of those were given away as gifts through the members of the delegation as part of that exchange of things, and to just that customer service aspect of, hey, you brought us some really good quality stuff. Please keep on bringing them back here. This is a gift for you as well, type of a thing.
We talk about the trade, and I mean, how many different tribes are going on. Let's talk about just within that trade aspect, how traders or clerks communicated with these different delegations, because you're dealing with the Blackfeet talk differently than the Arikara, than the Assiniboine, and so forth. So when you're going into that trade house, what is a big aspect of communication that is actively taking place to make this trade happen?
Yeah, you got to be able to understand each other. And they had a variety of ways of doing that. Sometimes the trader, um, sometimes we talk about like trade languages, like French would be one of those if we think more eastern part of the United States. The Huron language was sort of kind of a trade language as well. So if let's say that members of the delegation understood French, which would have been a fairly common language that you would have likely have heard at Fort Union, they might speak that together, understanding that aspect of things. Um, I don't think it ever got as bad as what it did with the Core of Discovery, where it goes through like five permutations of translation type of a thing. And I mean, try doing that on Google. Take a simple sentence and translate it through five different things and then translate it back and see if it's the same thing. If they don't understand a language like that, there was a group of people known as the Métis. A lot of times I will refer to them as the children of the fur trade because of this analogy. They are a group of people where mom or dad are from two different backgrounds. One's of European background, one's of native background. And as a result, oftentimes they're growing up being able to speak both mom and dad's native tongue, so to speak. Um, and a lot of times these folks are being employed by the post as post hunters as well as interpreters. So if you've got a delegation matched up with a trader and there's not a common language there, one of these Métis folks who's a hunter and an interpreter is coming on in and translating for them. If that's just not possible that particular day, the use of what gets referred to as Indian hand talk or Indian Sign Language gets used. In the United States, over the years, there's been between six or seven major hand talk dialects, depending on where you are geographically. And in the confluence area of the Yellowstone and Missouri, where Fort Union was located, a dialect referred to as Plains Indian Sign Language was the most common one that they would use. And it could take longer, but a benefit that they had is if you didn't understand quite what they meant by a sign, you could always ask for clarification. So you could go back and try to reword it and describe it with hand gestures till everyone understood what was going on. So just like at school, if I've got a student that's not quite sure what's going on, we teach our kids to raise their hands. And especially younger ones will get excited sometimes and they'll kind of move their hand back and forth. Well, literally how you ask a question within Plains Indian Sign Language. So you could, if you didn't understand what the last word was, um, today I was working with a group of kids and we were talking about Goldilocks and the three bears. You could go, question, bears, what is that, in other words, type of a thing. So then your person could go back and try to redescribe it using Plains Indian Sign Language gestures to get them to understand just what that particular sign meant. So you've got the speaking in a shared language, you've got the use of interpreters, and you've also got that use of Plains Indian Sign Language. Those are your top three ways that things are going to be utilized to be able to communicate. The hand talk could take longer, but some of those guys were very good at it. Um, if you're ever bored out there and want to see how fast that can go while it's much later in the time frame, there on YouTube are videos of Buffalo Bill Cody, and he's speaking to his friend, and they're doing it in hand gestures using Indian Sign Language, and they're cruising, man. I mean, some of these guys got really good at it, so it wouldn't necessarily have to take as long as what it might otherwise if you've got people who are real comfortable using that.
So just for those that might be listening versus being on YouTube, so when we were talking about some of this, like with the bear, a lot of these signs are fairly intuitive. Like you were mentioning the kid asking his question. I mean, yeah, you're kind of shaking twitching your hand almost in a way to say, hey, question, bear, kind of cupping your hands and putting them behind your ear to simulate, the rounded ears of a bear. Um, just so people are familiar. And yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Go check out that video of Buffalo Bill Cody. I cannot remember who he's talking to, but I know you and I and other members of the American Mountain, which we can get into later. I mean, go through this stuff, and just when you think you're doing good with doing sign, but also receiving it, then you go and watch Buffalo Bill Cody and his old friend,
Yeah.
and you're right, like they're not just cruising. These guys are on the Autobahn of sign. I mean,
Yeah.
and they're just living their best life, just catching up.
Oh,
I mean, he's offering a cigar to him and saying it's good. And I know they're talking about traveling, kind of bounding their hands back and forth, but that's about as far as I can get before I have to pause it and kind of go, okay, what are they exactly talking about besides just exchanging formalities?
yeah. Yeah, you get to where like we'll utilize that and I'll utilize it especially with school groups that end up coming in because it's a fun thing to do. And we'll do stuff like the Three Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf. And by the end, some of them are starting to figure out what it is. And then you talk through some of the signs and then you go through it again. And by the end, most everybody's able to do the hand signs and know what's going on. So it can be quite intuitive. We'll do it within our camp settings as well when I'm not under the auspices of the park system type of a thing. And you get to feeling pretty good about it. And then you watch that video and you're like, man, I have got so much more to do to be able to be fluent like they were type of a thing. But it's cool though, because it's one of those tangible things that we get to experience to help bring us back to that time frame that we try to teach people about. So anytime that whether it's me or other rangers, and our staff does a pretty good job of trying to take on different projects, hands-on thing or research things to kind of put us in the seat of 1851 or whatever the time frame is. Because if we can experience some of those things that those people who were stewards of their history did, that just helps us be able to connect the public to the importance of what was going on type of a thing. So that's anytime you get to do something like that, it's really important and it's a special thing. So there's lots of stuff available on YouTube. Go check it out. That's my plug for learn a little bit of Indian Sign Language because it's fun and it gives you a chance to kind of experience life back then.
There's also some good publications out there too. I mean, we can name drop some people, Dennis Leonard, Gene Hickman, and a lot of the benefit of this stuff is that people had the foresight before some of these people that knew all this stuff passed away to really document it. The technology's moving at a fast pace at the time. So a lot of this is recorded. Like, so we get to see Buffalo Bill Cody
Yeah.
doing this. So there was people that no different than Lewis and Clark just had the foresight to know that this is for posterity and this is just another layer of interpretation, but it's a way we're also preserving the past, the American experience, the Native American experience. And it's very important. And I mean, you can have fun doing this. I know I love my son is just looking in at it and he's 6 years old and is liking the animal science and
Yeah.
certain things like it's not very complicated and there's a lot of sign in today's modern sign that is somewhat attached with the sign of that time as well.
Yeah, not in every circumstance, but you can definitely see connections. You do have to be cautious of trying to use the two simultaneously because there are cases where a same or similar sign's used and they've got drastically different meanings. So you will want to be careful about that type of a thing. But especially if you've got any kind of background with sign language, um, this is it's super intuitive, like what we've said. So it's something that if you've got an interest in that, definitely look into it. Don't think that it's something that's beyond you, because I am not an overly smart man, you know, type of a thing. There are loads of people that know way more than me, and I've just been very fortunate to get to work with some of these people over the years, and they'll tell you the same thing. It's not beyond you. It just takes a little bit of time, and we're fortunate with the resources that we have available. Um, Combination of historic books like Tompkins Indian Sign Language book
Yep.
was one of the real big ones back in the 50s and the 60s. Different Boy Scout troops were using that as they were learning about Indian lore and different Indian tribes and things. Another one, a guy by the name of Clark, who actually I think he was an officer in the cavalry, and this is going to be much later on the time period. I think it's like 1880s. As they are traveling around, he's actually documenting all of these different hand gestures. and he's writing them down on a book and what they mean. And then we've got guys like Denny Leonard and Gene Hickman with their work that they've done. Lots of stuff on YouTube. Um, yeah, there's a lot of great um, resources that we have available now that we didn't that'll help anyone be successful with those, which is really nice.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we talked about just that melting pot of tribes, how the fur trade works, the goods of it. Fort Union really is that for a long, long time, that end of civilization, but it's a grand and majestic place. And the American Fur Company, they weren't dummies when it came to marketing. I mean, everything is branded, if you will, and meant to look to really impress people.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, talk about just the fort itself, the structures, some of the architecture, the colors of it. I mean, there's a reason why. I mean, we could go into sign of just why it's the great white house on the prairie.
Yeah, to begin with, and when it when you've got a trading post that lasts as long or remotely as long as a place like Fort Union, it will undergo different permutations. Just because that's what happens when a thing is outside and exposed to the elements. So it goes through essentially three or so different iterations of its design. It starts off with a picket style palisade wall or fence, so to speak. So when I say palisade and I say picket style, think of like that sharpened pencil stuck in the ground, like frontier, old-timey looking thing. It was kind of like that to begin with. But your building material is primarily cottonwood, which is not a great building material whatsoever. But you got a lot of it because you are right on the edge of a river and there's lots of cottonwood that grows along the river bottoms, type of a thing. So after a while, a storm comes up, they lose an entire wall, it blows down, they go to fix it, they lose it again, they change it up to what you see when you go there now. That became the mainstay, this rough-hewn, um, squared off timbers, vertical timbers. Behind them is a cross frame bracing, and that's all resting on top of a foundation of stone. So they're no longer like sinking those timbers into the ground. And on top of that, they're whitewashing everything. The doors were a glossy green color, very vibrant. The roofs that you see on the top of the bastions, a lot of times will, if you think of like a military blockhouse, it's kind of functionally, it was kind of designed to do the same thing. You've got whitewashed stone, but the roofs on those are a pretty vibrant red color, and it sticks out, and you can see it from quite a ways away. And the tribes referred to it, as you brought up already, as the Great White House on the Prairie. That's what they called Fort Union, and it was branding. To put it in today's parlance, that's essentially what it was. It was advertising because no other trading post in the area looked anything like that. And they were continually making sure that on the outside anyway, it was shipshape. It was looking good. In the middle of the courtyard, they had a ship's mast style flagpole from which they would raise the colors. They had a massive flag. In fact, on the inventory list of invoice ordered in 1831 to be delivered in 1832. They had on there what was referred to as the ensign, like a military set of nations' colors, basically, or as we call it today, the American flag, that they would fly. And especially if there were dignitaries that were going to be there, the arrival of the steamboat, all the people that were coming off of that, any kind of dignitaries, or when you had special groups of the tribes coming in that they were really hoping were going to show up, and finally they were there, and it was a big deal. They'd make sure that the flag was flying at the top of the flagpole in the courtyard. The steamboat, as it's coming up, it's a big deal. They had cannons there at Fort Union, deck guns, that was there for defense of the post if need be, but more often than not, they're firing it off to welcome the yearly steamboat that's arriving this week or thereabouts. Historically, when the river's at that June rise, they're trying to have that steamboat and the keel boats and stuff like that too arrive roughly at that high water mark so they can turn around and get back. So this is little moments of celebration, and they made a big deal out of that for the people that was around them. But yeah, that just the way that they made the fort look, they kept on maintaining that and keeping that for most of the fort's life. It was advertising, it was branding, and it worked pretty well.
So you highlighted here just the arrival of the steamboat and dignitaries and then keel boats. I mean, rivers are the interstates of their day.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the highway system.
yeah, and that accelerates the trade, but it also creates a melting pot of people that are coming in, whether it's clerks, engagés. Talk about just some of the notable people that walked through those gates that are a part of fur trade history, American history, and even just internationally. I mean, this place was an
Yeah.
Airbnb for its day at times.
Yeah, the bourgeois or the post manager. This is another funny conversation I had with visitors just this past week. We use a lot of French words in the fur trade, kind of regardless of where you are in the United States or Canada. In the United States, we would use the French term bourgeois for post manager, although in the Canadian fur trade, where there were arguably more French people involved, they use the term factor, which has just always kind of fascinated me. But if there were dignitaries, especially guys like Kenneth McKenzie, who was the post manager, he was the first post manager that Fort Union had, they'd be sure to entertain people. They'd be sure to show them a good time. And he's not the only one. We see him doing that. We see Culbertson do that. We see Denig do that. We see a number of these guys kind of follow suit with that. So as time goes on, there was at least one German duke, if not two. There was a German prince, Prince Maximilian of Wied Neuwied, who has with him a budding artist by the name of Karl Bodmer, who leaves us some very iconic images that shows us what Fort Union looks like from Bodmer's overlook, which is about it's like a 3 mile hike away. It leaves us an image from 1833, 1834 when they're visiting. So you've got guys like that. You've got the famous Western painter George Catlin. He's there at the site. You've got different scientists. You've got folks like John James Audubon, and he's got a small party that's with him. He's working on his book, the Viviparous Quadrupeds of North America, because it's fun to say, I guess. Guys like him are there, different ornithologists and folks that are big into um, oh the study of human beings of the past and stuff, where they're looking at it was a huge craze for a while. Ethnologists studying like the dimensions and the sizes of people's skulls and things like that. They're there. You've got different other notable and missionaries, I guess, would be kind of a term for them. There were some Lutheran missionaries that were there. You've got guys like Father Nicholas Point, who's there, who leaves some interesting artwork of showing like the inside of what the trade house looked like and interesting images of what people looked like. And then you've got a guy who is just kind of a force to be reckoned with sometime, Father De Smet, who's there a number of times. He's there also. You got a bunch of different people like that who are visiting Fort Union. Um, and a real neat thing about it, and I'll tie that into with the reconstruction that we've got. If you walk on into that trade house and you go in front of that giant hearth, now that hearth's not original, but you look at the stones you're standing on, these great big stones that are right in front of the hearth. Those are the original ones from the original fort back when it was in operation. So when you stand on those stones and you're looking at that pot of coffee that I've got going in there, um, you're standing on the same stones that guys like Edwin Denig stood on, Alexander Culbertson, Prince Maximilian, quite likely. All these different guys that we've talked about, a number of them stood on those same stones. And that's to a guy like me who really appreciates the history in all its, what I'll just describe as in all its ugliness and in all its glory. To be standing on those same stones where you get to talk to people about those men and women that were there, it's a real neat experience. Real neat experience.
Talk about just even some of the notable mountain men that
Oh
have
yeah.
come through.
Yeah, this guy by the name of John Palliser who's there, who is quite the hunter guy. There was a sickness going through, and he kind of helps make sure that they've got food because everyone's so sick. It's to the point where they're killing the milk cow as well too. Um, some buffaloes being brought in. It was really poor, and they're like, "Oh man, that terrible, terrible milk cow that we ate was so much better." But Palliser, he and Denig are kind of nursing everybody to health type of a thing. Every A lot of folks are familiar with the uh, wonderful fur trade fantasy film about Hugh Glass called The Revenant. Um, Hugh Glass actually was an employee at Fort Union. Kenneth Mackenzie bumps into him, quite likely on a steamboat, sees him, figures out who he is, knows this is an interesting fellow, and essentially on the spot goes, "How about you come be a hunter for me at Fort Union?" And Glass goes, "Yeah, let's do that." So he ends up being out there. He's a part of the Fort Union story as well. Jim Bridger, he's another one of those guys. Um, and then you've got if you look at just the the post managers as well, these guys end up doing a number of things in history as well that end up impacting things. Alexander Culbertson, you will see his image on the wall inside of the trade house to the left of the hearth there. His family is what Culbertson, North Dakota, or sorry, Culbertson, Montana, is named after. He and his wife, Nada Wista, who is an amazing woman, together they're able to accomplish some things with the railroad being able to connect and being able to bring goods back and forth and everything. Um, a number of these folks end up leaving quite a mark on things. Um, and guys like Culbertson, he wasn't just an interesting fellow. He was a guy that was really well respected within the different tribes as well. They trusted him, and he was trustworthy towards them. There's a within the National Park Service, we've got a site called Fort Laramie that a lot of people go to visit, which was a military post. But before it was a military post, it was an American Fur Company post, and it was called Fort John. And he was actually post manager there. 1851 rolls around, which again, we're reconstructed to at Fort Union, and he's gone. He's not at Fort Union right now. And that's why his image is on the wall, because Denig gets tired of talking to people about, look, he's gone, he's coming back. And you know, Kurz, do a painting of him and hang him up so people stop bugging me about it, kind of type of a thing. Just direct him towards the painting and let people know that he's coming back. He's gone to Fort Laramie because that 1851 Fort Laramie treaty is taking place. And the reason he's there is because the tribes trust him and he's acting as an intermediary for them. Within the AFC, within the Western Department, which Fort Union was a part of, or the Upper Missouri outfit is another term for it as well, too. If there were issues, home office would be like, all right, Culbertson, things are not going well. We need you to fix them. And he shows up at a fur post and he figures out what's going wrong and kind of smooths things over and gets everybody working well together. Chardon was kind of the bane of his existence from time to time. Francis Chardon was the post manager at Fort Clark, and is a referring to him as a character, I believe, would be an appropriate descriptor of him. He ends up being in Western Montana, ticks a bunch of people off. Posts get burned down. Culbertson has to go and kind of sort things out. Wherever he goes, he just does a good job of getting people to work with each other, which is kind of incredible. In fact, there's a book written about him called Frontier Diplomat that if you're into geeking out about that kind of stuff, definitely check it out. You get to learn more about that guy, and he was able to work with a variety of people, especially the tribes.
Yeah, just a little plug for Fort Clark. I know we're talking about Fort Union, but uh journals sometimes can be dry, but Francis Chardon's journal of him at Fort Clark I like to say just in a nutshell, it's kind of the story of a man who goes salty from probably being out west way too long. Uh,
Yeah,
but it gives you a really good indicator too of just what he's seeing. And plus you also you're talking about Palliser when everyone gets sick. There's that 1837 smallpox epidemic that comes through.
yeah.
That's very, very pivotal. So, I mean, that's something to look into as well. So, I mean, we've kind of talked about the fort itself, the branding, the tribes, everything else. We have this rich history. This, in this now we have a reconstructed fort. Let's get into a little bit of just Fort Union Rendezvous itself. So it's been going on now. This year will be 41 years. Uh, Tell people a little bit uh, what you can expect from the moment you kind of get into the parking lot and you're heading up to the fort, how long the rendezvous is taking, how many days, and just some cool things that people can expect to see while they're there.
Yeah, this is if you've got the opportunity to definitely stop by, we will see between 3 and 5,000 visitors over the course of that weekend. It runs Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and part of Sunday. Thursday, especially if you got kids, come on out from 10 to 2, if I'm remembering correctly, is Kids Day. So we've got a variety of activities lined up for kids to have fun, win some prizes and things, and learn a little bit about the rich Confluence area history that we've got. We've got presenters that'll be going on all day long. We've got folks that'll be in the blacksmith shop. We've got our very own potter who comes in and demonstrates historic pottery and talks about the type of clay and how they did that and the slips and all of that sort of things. We've got fellows that will be doing historic gunsmithing and talking about those things. There'll be different spot presenters around the fort as well too. Guys demonstrating frontier cooking, and how that kind of linked up with how do you feed a post like Fort Union, where during this time of the year you've got 100 employees. How do you do that? What's the role of the fort hunter? And you'll get to talk to a fellow who portrays a fort hunter, and that's kind of all going around outside of the post, not to mention what you're going to get to experience when you go inside and you get to go inside that trade house. Definitely go stand on those stones, guys. That is such a cool thing to be able to do, to stand on those same stones where so many of those prominent people and different tribal leaders stood over the passage of time. You'll get to see that sampling of those 200 some odd different trade goods that were coming from all over the world. Remember, this is tribal driven inventory, and some of these items, it's taking them 2 years to get here. To be in there because that's what the tribes want. Inside the bourgeois house or post manager's house, it's the great big fancy white house in the middle. Our bookstore is in there. We've got our museum in there. If you enjoy watching things like the park site videos, we've got a variety of those that are available to watch inside. We don't have like a regular showing time. It's in a machine that's all push button activated. So go on in and hit the top button. That'll give you kind of a site overview. And then we've got 7 other options that, depending on what your interests are, go ahead and pop one of those other ones and learn about some of the different things that were taking place. So 4 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If you've got kids, definitely come on out. Thursday, we got some special things for them. And we've got things taking place all day, most of the rest of the time. We'll have those, the, I don't want to call it itinerary. We'll call it order of the day. We'll have those that'll be posted and will be available at the front desk when you come in on and see us as well. Something really special though this year, and there's a reason why I've got the background that I've got behind me. This is a keel boat. This is a
As
two-thirds
Leif
scale keel
literally just
boat.
keeled out of the camera view. I'm
I
sorry.
keeled on the camera. I am I am standing right there. That's me. Um, this is the General William Ashley. She's a two-thirds scale keelboat, about 33 feet in length. And we are so very fortunate due to the efforts of the Fort Union Association and the American Mountain Men. We actually have her now. That vessel is at Fort Union and is very indicative of the style of craft that was being used on the Upper Missouri, even after the steamboat was there, because they are using these smaller vessels to be able to outfit the smaller trading posts further upriver for the AFC. So, I mean, she's a beaut. I had the wonderful opportunity myself and two other volunteers that are going to be um, with her this next weekend. Mr. Sawyer Flynn, who's a former park ranger within the Park Service, and one of our volunteers, Mr. Cedric Halvorson. All three of us were aboard the William Ashley's final voyage on the the Upper Missouri River breaks up by present day Fort Benton, and they're going to be able to talk to you about how it works. What's life like on a keelboat? The importance of how it was being utilized to bring goods and items to these different trading posts, which made trade possible. The challenges, the excitement, and in some cases, the sheer horror of some of the things that were taking place. So we're really super excited. I'll show you again, if for no other reason. Come on out and see the General William Ashley. We're so excited to be able to share this vessel with the public. It's a wonderful thing to be able to learn about our past.
This is a good opportunity again. I mean, if you haven't clicked that subscribe button on YouTube, go ahead and do it so you can actually see the picture that Leif has on his background. I mean, there's a lot of, like you said, notable people in there. I mean, there's obviously you, Neil Jones, Mark Brown's on there, your
Yeah.
brother, Cedric, Sawyer Flynn. I believe that's Mike Nottingham up there, right over by the plank.
Yeah, Mike Nottingham, he was the captain. There were a couple other fellows as well too. Daniel Lampig, he and Neil Jones came up together. Oh man,
Was Dennis Borrud on
Daryl.
that on this picture?
Yes.
I think he
I'm going to
was. I think he's right in the
hesitantly
back.
say yes and shake my head like I know what I'm talking about.
But I mean, go ahead, folks, and go ahead and subscribe to that. You can also just type in Williston Herald, like Band Day Keelboat. I'm a member of the Fort Union Association myself, and helped with the press release for that, just to kind of showcase that out to the public. So that was in Williston's annual Band Day parade. But it is a good opportunity to come and learn. And I think between me and you, brother, you know what we got to do now, since we have this thing. We need to make some reproduction fur trade bales and actually get some reproduction cargo for this bad boy. Uh,
Yeah,
fun winter project, right?
I've got the sale almost done. I have been working on that historic keelboat sale.
Yep. And he's been working on this thing for, I mean, you were working on what, past 2 years?
Yeah, yeah, I've been working on river stuff, and yeah, the past 2 years off and on that keelboat sale is part of the interpretive programming that I've been a part of at the site.
So where is Fort Union located for those that might not know? Where can we find you online, social media channels, you name it, so people can find all the nitty gritty, the details, everything.
Yeah, so online, uh, we've got our National Park Service website. If you do a search for Fort Union Trading Post, because there's another one. There's Fort Union National Monument, New Mexico, which is an Adobe military post. If you're in that neck of the woods, check it out because it's a real neat thing. But we're not that one. We're the one that says outside of Williston, North Dakota. So on the National Park Service website, you can find us there. On Facebook, super easy. Just do a search for Fort Union Trading Post. Um, whether it's that or Fort Union Trading Post National Historic Site, you'll be able to find our website there. We do have a YouTube channel as well. We don't necessarily always have new videos going up, but if you're not able to make it to the rendezvous, the videos that are available in our museum, the different park videos are available on our YouTube channel. So you can still kind of be a part of the fun, even if you've got the chance to go see that. If you are on the Montana side, it's right off of Highway 1804. If you're heading north from Sydney on Highway 16, you go through Fairview, you go through the roundabout, and you keep on heading north. You're going to cross the Missouri River Bridge. Once you cross that, there'll be a sign that says to the left, turn to go to Fort Union, and you'll be able to see it once you go down the road a little bit more. If you are in the Williston, North Dakota neck of the woods, you're going to take Highway 2 out of town, go on down through Trenton, keep on following that road. You're going to go past the MISIC, the Montana Yellowstone Confluence Interpretive Center, and Fort Buford. Keep on going. You're going to make a right-hand turn to take you to Fort Union. And when you're done checking things out at Fort Union, go over and stop and see their friends over there at Fort Buford. And this is the reason why. We've been talking about the history of the confluence area. When Fort Union closes down, that's not the end of the story for the confluence. In 1867, when it closes down, the Army, which has just built Buford 9 months prior, they come on over, tear down a good chunk of Fort Union, transport those building supplies over to Fort Buford. They're kind of patrolling and guarding that confluence area right there. What's happened is Fort Union's done. You flip the page. The very next chapter is that time of Fort Buford that continues on the history of the confluence area. So since you're there, check out Buford and the MISIC as well too. They got great staff over there. It's a wonderful site. We got a lot of rich history in the area there.
We've covered a lot. Once again, thank you for being on. I'll just leave this last part for you. Anything else that you think you might have missed? Anything that the public should know? It's all yours. Floor is yours, Senator.
Number one, we operate on Central Time, and that's probably one of the biggest frustrations that people have in traveling because our western parking lot resides within Montana. So understand that we operate on Central Time. I'm sorry for all the confusion, guys, but we've really tried to make sure that we've got our bases covered. Our NPS website has got the times in there for you. Our Facebook page has got the times for you. And when you enter the site, we've got a sign on the right-hand side as you drive in that gives you that heads up. Hey, we are open from 9 to 5 p.m. Central Time that we're operating on. Even if you miss the opportunity to come visit us this next weekend, come on out and see us again. We are open all year long except for 3 days in particular. We are closed New Year's Day. We are closed Thanksgiving Day. We are closed Christmas Day. There will be some days where in the winter months, because we are on the Montana North Dakota border, and our winters can be a bit daunting sometimes. Black ice and stuff like that. We'll close the site. Stay home. Come see us in some nicer day. Don't brave the weather. We're going to be open for you eventually, within a close proximity to that. But yeah, you all year long, we're open. We'll have folks around, and we'd love to share with you the history of not just our site there and the impact that it's had, and all the different tribes that have come and have been a part of the history there that are still here. They're still here in the area. Um, about the history of the confluence area as well too. We're glad to be able to be stewards of that history and share it with people. So come on out and see us.
And I'll be sure to put Fort Union's website, your social media handles, and all that within the captions that you can find wherever you get your podcasts, and the Past Less Traveled, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, and so forth. So that way folks can get linked in. I'm looking forward to Rendezvous next week. I know you are. I know it's also for those of us that take an active role. It's a lot of work, but sometimes it's
Yeah.
not work when we have a passion for this sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a huge difference. Until you go through that, like you kind of can observe it as a participant, whether you are visiting or you're one of the living historians that gets to camp. But there is so much work that takes place behind the scenes, and we do that for you guys. We do that for the public. We do that for all of our. We get a lot of visitors from around the world that come in as well too. Um, and we do that because it's a worthwhile history to share, and a lot of things that you've seen on TV and whatnot is not always the best material. It's not always as refined. I'm trying to be as diplomatic as I can with that. But we do this so that you can have a better experience of getting to understand the differences between what you may see depicted on a screen versus what actually was, and about the people that were a part of that These are not just some faces or some names on a page. These are real people, and we want to make sure you get the opportunity to understand who those people were.
And I mean, for if you're looking at coming out and just checking it out, visiting first time, I mean, ask questions. I mean, we are approachable people. Don't think that just because we are in clothing from 150 plus years ago that we're not approachable. I mean, we want to engage, we want to educate,
Yep.
especially. So with that, once again, man, thanks for coming on, and thanks for I mean, sharing a place that's right in our backyard, but a place that just about anybody, I don't care where you're from, needs to come and check out at some point in their life.
Yeah, for so many folks, they'll drive by and say, been here my whole life and decided it was finally time to stop on out. I'm glad you did. Well, let's talk about what you've been driving by the past 15 years or whatever. And that happens for a lot of people. So this is the first time that you're seeing it. Make the decision this time. Come on out, see what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, with that, I can't say thank you enough.
You bet, Brandon, anytime.